なで一緒に行けば。
Hello and welcome to The Last Picture House, literally the last word in film. I'm Marcus Lovett, and this week I'm joined by fellow pundits Ian Norton and Maria Suzuki. On this episode, we're speaking with CG animator Stephane Mangin about his work on such films as Jungle Book, Mowgli, Fantastic Beasts, Frozen, and Wreck-It Ralph. We'll be asking him how he got his start in the industry, how technology has changed the business, and about films that inspire him. And with little over a year to go until the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, we thought it would be a good time to look back at Katsuhiro Otomo's 1988 cyberpunk masterpiece, Akira. And as always, if you like what you hear, don't forget to hit subscribe and please rate or review us on iTunes. Our guest this week is an animation supervisor who has worked with some of the world's foremost studios and effects houses. He also happens to be a good friend of the show. Stephane, welcome.
Well, hi there.
Maybe we could start by asking, when did your interest in animation begin?
Wow, that was quite some time ago, actually. To get back to where I come from, so I'm French, of course, because of the accent. It's fairly easy to recognize. I live in a city called Annecy, and it happened that in this city there's like this huge animation festival, and probably the biggest in the world, actually. I've been like going every year and to just like check this festival, but the movie that struck me down when I was young, I think I was about maybe like 11 or 12 at this moment. That was Laputa and Miyazaki. First time showing abroad, so it was in Japanese, subtitled in English. Of course, my English was actually like it has non-existent. Exactly. Like non-existent whatsoever. But like I was just like blew away by the quality of the animation. That's how I just became an animator.
Where did you study design or animation?
It's quite funny because I always wanted to be an animator, but my parents, my father being a banker and my mom being at home, he wouldn't even think that I could make money out of animation. So he wanted me to do like design. So I actually started in a design school and I was extremely bad at it. So I had to quit because I was really bad. So I quit, got like a sabbatic year, and then I studied in a small school which just opened like in the suburb of Paris. It's called Georges Méliès School. I don't know, I just took it like naturally, and I became, and I just chose to be an animator through there, basically, through this school.
Yeah, so how long was the program?
That was 2 or 3 years. It's fairly short, but then you learn everything, basically. You learn how to be kind of a director.
Knowing you as well as I do, Stephane, were you a good student?
In design, I was actually pretty bad, but then in animation, yeah, surprisingly, I was good.
One thing that I was curious about, I grew up in Italy, so not so distant from you. And Italians, me included, watched a lot of Japanese animation on TV. Was there anything that you watched at home and that you were following at the time?
Yeah, actually, there was like about Dragon Ball. Everybody, like, I think the world knew about Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
And so we like this, I mean, for me, it was like I studied Dragon Ball and Saint Seiya, which is like in French, it's called like Chevalier du Zodiac, and that was actually, this and Dragon Ball were like the most viewed anime ever. On top of that, that was actually censored, so they used to cut all the bloody parts. So if you look at like Dragon Ball, each of the episodes were actually like 20 minutes, but at the end it just ended up being like 15 to like 12 minutes episode. So
censorship in France,
yes,
the land of freedom.
No freedom in anime, I'm afraid.
So did you go back and see and watch the uncut version?
Actually, we couldn't find them in France for a long time until they released like the VHS. First, that was the VHS. I'm the VHS generation kind of child. And I'm actually not sure they actually released them in a VHS. But in DVD, yes, you can get the uncensored version. And that was amazing. Finally, I could see how they all died.
And was it always animated movies or TV shows, or did you read sort of comics and manga as well? Because one of my endearing memories of holidays to France was my father would go and get French comics and read them to us because we couldn't get them in England. So he would read these French comics to us and then have to translate into English.
Yeah, we used to have, it's funny enough, is to go back to like the manga, like France, I think in the world, is actually, we're actually the second biggest manga reader in the world. and just after Japan, of course. And so we have a huge collection of any kind of manga. And so I used to read that even when the manga was still in Japanese. I used to buy them in Japanese and just try to understand what was happening in the manga. And yeah, I was a huge otaku, I have to say.
What was your first job in the industry?
That was direct DVD. I mean, back then I think that was probably direct VHS called Twice Upon a Christmas. So that was for Disney. So I was actually gifted as a first job to work for Disney, even though that was like a straight DVD. But that was the level, the quality asked was actually pretty high. Yeah, that was my very first job.
And so after that, did you immediately leave to work elsewhere?
No. I stayed in France for quite some time. I think probably over 6 years. It's always good to just get your experience from your own country because moving abroad with the barrier language and language barrier, there you go, and all that, and the fact that you really need to be confident about your own skill before moving abroad. So I worked for 6 years and I made this movie called Despicable Me. Everybody knows about Despicable Me.
Even I watched it, yes.
There you go.
I love the Minion.
Yeah, of
The
course.
main language includes always Italian and Japanese. Have you noticed?
And banana.
Yeah, I'm banana, of course. Banana.
Banana is universal. So this movie actually have been made in France, which is like, that was like a first time in France that we are doing something so international. And so just after this movie, I decided to go to the UK, which was actually the closest country to work in.
To London?
To London, yep.
And was that for animation or was that more CG?
That was for VFX, basically,
Yeah.
because London is, for the most part, like let's say 80% of London is VFX industry based.
Yeah, around Soho Square. I mean, it's all...
Oh man,
yeah.
it's crazy. They all get their own pubs as well. And so if you want to meet some people, if you want to get a job to another studio, just go to the other studio pub and then you ask for the supervisors.
It was like that when I was living there in like 2000, 2001. So this is later, right?
Yeah. But still the same. They kept the tradition.
So, was there any particular difficulties you faced working in a second language, or of course now in your third, or even directing or organizing your staff working in a second language?
Moving abroad was actually, that was my first experience in English. My English was actually really bad back then in France. And so when I moved there, I moved to this studio called Double Negative, which is an amazing, huge studio in London. And so my animation director back then, I think he really appreciated me, and so he actually put me as an animation lead, not knowing any English. Like my English was as good as a 5-year-old kid, and so I needed to learn English quick. And the only way I learned English actually was at the pub,
The best place to learn.
Exactly. So that's how I learned English. But then that was really hard at the beginning. But then I got used to it.
Animators and VFX people, they move from company to company, right?
Yeah, it's because we have we kind of like contract-based, kind of project-based contract, and so being like so we kind of like temporary job. It depends where you're living, but if you live in London, you have several like huge companies, and so you will always find a project to work on. So you finish one project, you just call your friend or whatever, or even you have like 2 or 3 movies lined up. So you just keep on going and just like going from one studio to another. The beauty of it as well is that you can actually live abroad in that kind of case because it's easy to move abroad.
Yeah, you're saying about changing jobs. I remember us being in the pub one night and you confessed like the studio you were working for was having some trouble. And I remember you said, I'm just going to upload my resume now because I need to let people know. And it was about half an hour before you started getting offers. And then you're like, I can go to London, I can go to Paris. I think you're hiding your light under a bushel a little bit too much there. But let's get back on track. Where did you go after London?
So after London, that was the thing that as an animator, like most of the animators' biggest dream is to work for Disney. I was lucky enough to be able to get there.
There means
California? There actually in California, in Los Angeles. First time for me in Los Angeles, first time in US. I went there just like for like 1 week, just holidays, but first time for real. And just so I arrived freshly in Los Angeles with my Frenchy English. Started at Disney, and I worked there for like 2 years. I worked on Wreck-It Ralph and Frozen. But the thing that, since I'm kind of like a citizen kind of guy, I like just like walking around and just like going to museum and all, and like taking like a transportation. Los Angeles was not really a city fit for me. It's like Los Angeles is extremely big. You have to drive wherever you go.
This is pre-Uber, obviously.
This is pre-Uber. Uber. Yeah, that was actually that was like Uber just like started to kick in. But yeah, I didn't really like the older driving stuff. So I decided to move to my second dream, which was actually because of Miyazaki movie and stuff, was actually to live in Japan. I was like, I want to go in Japan. So I moved in Japan, and I actually got a little bit shocked about how the industry is here.
In what way?
It's kind of like you go back 10 years back in time compared to other countries. It's extremely old-fashioned way here, and like the old technology is really bad. Not bad, but like it's not really advanced.
So while you were working at Disney, particularly on Frozen, did you realize it was going to be such a big phenomenon when you were working on it?
Well, actually, no. That's the thing that most of the people, because we worked really hard on this movie, we did quite some overtime and all, and we were like more than 80 animators, but like nobody would have known that this project would be such a huge success. Compared to Wreck-It Ralph, which was the movie I worked in before, and Wreck-It Ralph, actually, I was really happy about it, and I was sure it's going to be a proper success. And actually, it was alright. It was kind of like warm luck success.
Working at Disney, things had definitely scaled up for you. I mean, you're working with much larger teams. Was there a big surprise there for you, a challenge?
The main challenge was actually, but the thing that because in the UK, working for Double Negative is such a huge company as well. I worked on John Carter, and this project, I think we were about like 100 animators towards the end, like during the crunch time. So when I moved to Disney, I was actually used to work with like a huge team as well. But you start at Disney, you start with like 30 animators, and then you ramp up to, I think on Wreck-It Ralph was about like 50, 60, 70. I don't really know, like between 60 maybe. And Frozen was actually like 80, 90 animators or something.
Working on something like John Carter, like obviously it was a lot of animators and it cost a lot of money, but it was a massive flop. How do you feel as an animator there? Are you kind of detached from the process, or does it make you upset? Or how does it feel when the movie obviously just doesn't work?
Well, John Carter was actually I don't know, maybe like my most beloved project I worked on. I think just because of like the new experience of being abroad.
Nice one, Ian.
So yeah, well done. So I know I was shocked. I really believed on this movie so much, and I was like, that's gonna be like the new, like kind of like B series, fantastic movie, and like everybody's gonna love it. And well, no, it was a huge failure. But the movie itself is pretty good. I can't blame the director. The movie itself is pretty good. Just the communication around was really bad.
So the marketing, basically.
Yeah, the marketing was actually and I think they chose some color for like the all the posters and all that was like deep red and yellow and some kind
They
of
went
like
with the retro kind of Martian look. Yeah.
But I think that was a little bit too much, though.
Yeah.
Je suis désolé.
I'm interested in how you handle the deadlines. You talked about ramping up for Frozen. How do you handle the pressures of working to budgets, to deadlines?
It's just basically we all have like schedule basically based on like either it's daily basis, either it's weekly basis, and so if you have to finish your shot, you just stay longer at work. The thing that you see like people coming in and you see that you see all the shots that you need to achieve before the end of the projection. So you've got like this deadline and you see it coming. And usually, if you work let's say at Disney they actually take care a lot about the animators. Even though you do overtime, they still want you to achieve like the best quality ever. They treat you pretty well and always like food, like a dinner offer dinner and stuff, and even like massage and stuff like this. So, can't blame it. But you already have to, because you have to think that an animation movie is done between like 6 months to 1 year. It takes a lot of time, and so it takes a lot of patience.
And during that time, you're working more or less in the same environment all the time. You're working in some sort of bunker.
Yeah, at Disney I used to have like this kind of like box, like I
the
used
cubicle.
To my cubicle. I used to have my own cubicle, and I even asked for like being like a stand-up desk, just so I don't sit for like 10 hours like every day at my desk. So I was standing up, and I put some posters everywhere on my stuff. I even have a little sofa so I can rest a little bit, and so it became kind of like my second house.
And how is the interaction with the colleagues if you're in the box?
Well,
Is there
you
any?
don't really interact much. That's the thing. You interact with Facebook more than the people around you. You interact like during lunchtime and during dailies and things like this. I don't know. It's probably because I'm European, but like the connection with American people was actually harder than it was with English people. I think maybe English people are more used to foreigners and to European. Yeah, to the drinking. Thank you, Ian, for the gesture. That's how you actually create bond basically. But being in Los Angeles and driving, you can't do all those like bounding at the pub because you have to go home with your own car. So yeah.
Yeah. I would like to ask a question about how is the work organized? So is there assignments? Like, do you have to like follow one character? How does it work?
Yeah, it's actually based on the skills of each animator. Let's say you're gonna have some animators that are much more cartoony, or some people who they'd rather do action because they're not really good in acting stuff. They're only gonna do like action sequences, whichever character they're actually good at. And back at Disney, you have few girls which are like you have way more girls than that, but like there's few girls that they only do acting stuff, and they're so subtle, and they just love like whatever they do is just it's mind blowing, and I will never be able to achieve this kind of quality, but that's what they specialize in. So me, I'm more specialized into I don't know. It's kind of like I'm a mixed bag because I can do both. I can do VFX and I can do cartoony animation as well. Yeah, it kind of depends. But for some people, it's like only acting, and they do it perfectly well.
So is it a choice thing? Like, do you get to choice what
It's
you
more.
want to do?
I think it's more about how you feel it and how you just react, just like your sensibility about things. Some people they just don't understand much about acting. Some others they don't understand much about like body motion. So it's just like how you feel everything. Animation is really about feelings. You just like go where you think you're best at and just like try to focus on it.
And how much do you get to interact with audiences?
None.
You're sitting in your cubicle
Yeah.
and you're imagining what the audience is going to see. You're also thinking, this will have an impact. If I do this character in this particular way, this is going to have a greater impact. This is going to sell the story more. You must have a screening room.
Actually, when we do this, it's top secret kind of movie, so nobody from outside the studio can actually enter the studio, and they actually do a projection. Like Disney, they always do a projection where, let's say like 90% of the animation done, at this time, they're gonna do like a private, like super top secret in the middle of like Texas or wherever, like super top secret projection just for like the lambda, like average family people, and those
Little cards so they can comment.
yeah, exactly. And then they just give their feedbacks, and we were really scared about that, just because those people that just doesn't work in the industry actually have like much more power than we have somehow, because that's what they want to see. So we have to just please them, basically.
After the release of the film, though, do you have time to sit with general audiences, watch the film, see how they react to them?
Yeah, that's actually that's the beauty. When you go to the theater and you see how people like laugh at the shots you've done, or just like how they enjoy, and you're in the middle and they don't know that you actually work on this movie, and for you it's the biggest achievement. It's just like to see how people can love what you've done, even though they will never know that you've done it.
Is it nerve-wracking?
No, yeah, that was on John Carter. Yeah, it was. But then, yeah, like let's say for Frozen, that was like such a. I was so proud when I see and then I waited for my name on the credits, and when you see your name, and people are like, "Oh, look, that's you!" Man, that's amazing. That's that's gold.
How people consume animation has kind of changed. Has that changed the way you animate or the process of the industry itself?
I think right now, yeah. 20 years ago, animation was actually an artistry more than anything else, and it took time and it took money, but nobody would actually care about this budget and all. Right now, because of like the easy access to the software, and because of Asian countries such as China, of course, and Indonesia, or even in Thailand and all, you get all those like big studios opening there with like much smaller budgets production because people over there are paid way less than you will be in Disney, let's say. But those people are accessed the same software. So at the end, they can actually make TV series and things like this for much cheaper that you can actually achieve in Europe or in US.
So I imagine your work involves a lot of repetition.
Yes.
How do you stay fresh? How do you stay focused?
The salary. No, to be
Sit
serious.
back and think about the money.
Exactly. How am I gonna pay my rent this month? No, it's actually not. No, it's more like you don't really. Of course, you have to repeat what you're doing, but the thing is that it's still animation. It's kind of like if you repeat doing the same. Let's say like a mangaka or like a comic book drawer, he always gonna repeat the same characters and all. But then it's his own artistry that he's putting on the paper. And so for me, it's kind of the same. I'm doing animation, even though the animation will look like a bit like another animation I made like the week before. Still, it's still something that I'm enjoying doing on a daily basis. And the thing that because you're using CG, you can actually copy paste animation. So it's very easy to just like I just get my shot from last week and I just like copy and paste it on the next shot and that's it.
Industry secret.
Exactly.
So what industry trends are you following? What are the things that are changing in your business right now that you think you have to keep focused on?
The new generation, they're cheaper. They actually know the software better. But no, I would say because nowadays, like I said already, the software actually are easy now to buy. Like everybody can get a license of alias Wavefront Maya, which is like like 90% of the industry is using this software. But like 10 years ago, it was extremely expensive to get, and but nowadays everybody can get that. And
So
plus,
that idea of the specialist is more people have the general skills that allow them to be animated.
yeah, and you get like all the online school as well. If you don't need to go to like a proper school, you can just like take those lessons online, and you already have the software, or you can use other software. Like there's another software called Blender, which is like a free software, but actually you can achieve the same quality as you can get with alias Wavefront. It's open to the world basically.
So the barrier to entry has dropped.
Exactly. But the thing that would be like me in my job as an animator, it's kind of more based on the skills. So you don't matter the software, it's only the skill that matter. We kind of like the more detached of all this technical kind of industry that we're living in. If you talk about that to like VFX people doing like dynamics, let's say fire, water and stuff like this, yeah, those people, they have to be on top of what they're doing and they have to be up to date to each software. But for me, it's like animation, it's all in your head basically.
I think I know the answer to this question, but 3D or 2D animation, which do you prefer?
Let's say 3D just because I'm really bad at 2D.
And do you rather working on photorealistic characters or more stylized characters?
I will go more for I don't know, because I'm actually enjoying both. Maybe more like stylized, because realistic get limitation in the body motion, like if you work on movies such as like Jungle Book or Mowgli, you have to animate a tiger the way it should be animated, the way it should be moving, and so it's extremely important to be precise.
I wanted to ask you a question about two specific films, which you did, Jungle Book and Mowgli.
Yeah.
So for me, I watched both of the movies, and there were problems because especially Mowgli was kind of a passion project for Andy Gullum Circus, and it was kind of a bad timing because he wanted to do it, but the Jungle Book kind of was very close. But one thing that really didn't work for me in Mowgli was the animation, because I thought on a very personal level, the animals were built on humans' expression. So I could see, for example, Ka is Kate Blanchett, so I could kind of recognize a feature. So they were very de-animalized, so I could not feel for them as an animal lover. So what is the professional opinion?
I don't know. It's kind of, let's say he brought something new to what could have been a pale copy of Jungle Book. I have to admit, the Disney Jungle Book was just like pure, like 100%, 150% realistic animation. And even like the actings, everything were not meant to be like human. So he had to just take like another path, basically. And the other path was actually to make animals a little bit more human. But yeah, design-wise, that could be a bit... That could be, yeah.
Did you get to do the same character? Because I think you did Baloo
Yeah.
on the Jungle Book, right?
So on Jungle Book I did.
Which I adore because it's
I-
Bill Murray.
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
a
it was
perfect
very
bear
nice.
and it's perfect Bill Murray. So
Exactly. And the voice went so well. We're like all together.
Yes.
That was amazing. That was blending so well. So I did Shere Khan and I did Baloo on the Jungle Book. But then, funny enough, on Mowgli, I had to do Baloo as well. Baloo was actually Andy Serkis. So I had to supervise Baloo at the very
Okay.
beginning of the production, and I did a bit of Shere Khan as well. So I had to animate on both. And
my honey, kind of.
oh,
no.
yeah. No. That was more like it was kind of
Right.
like shouting like a like coach, like a boxing coach, and actually I did like this version better somehow.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Andy Serkis he's a nice guy to talk to, and I do enjoy the fact that he's trying something a bit different. So working with him was actually quite easy, easier than I thought.
So who are your biggest influences? Directors, animators?
I don't know, maybe Hayao Miyazaki was like, because of like the very beginning, like the first movie I watched was actually La Puta. So this guy remains as like the biggest genius in the whole animation industry, to me, in my opinion.
It is a great place to start.
Exactly. Starting from there, I mean, everything he made was actually, it just was mind-blowing. But no, I couldn't find any other source of inspiration. For me, that's like the best I had.
How about outside the industry in terms of like the storytelling that you enjoy watching, like the live action films?
I always love Darren Aronofsky. Not the Noah version he made, that was really bad, but like all the other movies, like, and even like the wrestler is like,
Yes.
I don't know, it's like this guy, he knows how to handle a camera. It's kind of like he tries so hard to do something a bit different, to really have his own style. Iñárritu as well. Iñárritu, did he do, what was the name?
Iñárritu.
Iñárritu. Sorry,
Iñárritu.
yeah, Iñárritu.
I read that he was supposed to be doing Mowgli.
He was,
Yeah.
was he?
Yeah.
I didn't even know about this.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
He should
You were
have done
close
it.
to. I mean,
You're close to having late nights of mezcal.
Oh man, that would
no,
have
that's
been
me.
amazing.
He didn't have any. I asked for some.
That would have been amazing. I do like directors that actually do something a bit different.
I'm interested in how live action would influence what you do, but it sounds to me like the supervisor that you have is the person who is responsible to the director taking those ideas down the chain. When you get it, you're dealing with the detail rather than the
big picture.
the bigger picture, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's that. If you work in VFX industry, you're actually doing the small little detail. You don't even know the story itself of the whole movie because you're not allowed to watch the movie because it's still a secret. But if you work, let's say at Disney, and you work on the next movie, like Frozen 2 or whatever, you've seen the storyboard almost like 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 different versions, from like really bad to okay to acceptable, and so forth, and to what Disney movie are right now. It's like when you work on CG feature, you see the whole chain.
So you understand your place in the storytelling.
Yes, you understand what happened before and what happened after. And actually, that's really important, just because if you have to do some acting, you have to understand what the actors or like the character at this moment is thinking and why is he thinking this way, because you already have to follow the arc of the character. While on VFX industry, they don't allow you to see this. So you just have to animate your little bit and hope that it's actually going to match what the live action character does.
Stephane,
Yes.
what's next?
Oh, I'm getting back to Europe. I'm leaving in 2 months, actually.
You're leaving us.
Yeah, I may gonna come back though, but it comes as a surprise. But I'm going back to Europe. I'm going back to France, working for a small company called Fortiche Production. It's amazing. I mean, I love the people working there. They're extremely talented people. If you check their website, they've done a lot of they've done video clips and stuff like this, which looks kind of like 2D-ish style, but they're super good at it. It kind of look a bit like Spider-Man, the new Spider-Verse movie from Sony. And so I'm gonna work there for the next 2 years, and then I may gonna go back to Japan afterwards. Who knows?
Katsuhiro Otomo's 1988 dystopian drama Akira is now regarded as not only a classic Japanese anime, but also a masterpiece of science fiction. Its influence is everywhere, in the Wachowskis' Matrix, Christopher Nolan's Inception, and in Rian Johnson's Looper. Said to be the biggest budget Japanese anime of its time, it reportedly cost a cool 1 trillion yen, the film employs many of the genre beats familiar to contemporary sci-fi blockbusters. Action sequences, body horror, political unrest, and the notion of the chosen one. The film opens with a memorable title card, 31 years after World War III, AD 2019, Neo-Tokyo. What follows is a flashback, a nuclear flash, and the complete destruction of the Japanese capital. We're then introduced to a group of teens, members of a biker gang. There's Kaneda, the gang's leader, and his childhood friend Tetsuo. One night they ride out to fight another gang. During the skirmish, Tetsuo crashes his bike after colliding with what appears to be a small child. Tetsuo and the child are whisked away by military helicopters. Tetsuo wakes up to find himself imbued with magical powers, while Kaneda embarks on a search to track down his friend. Stephane, do you remember the first time you saw the film?
Yeah, I remember that. I think I was about 12 years old, or 12 or 13 or something like this. And the thing that it was released in France in the theater, but like few theater, because actually it was like kind of violent anime, and like back then it's like we didn't really know about this, so I missed it in the theater, and then so I bought the VHS, and I was young and all, and so I was so happy. But like the VHS kind of like magically disappeared after 3 or 4 months, and I couldn't find it. So I asked my friend and all, I asked my family, and I forced my brother to tell me the truth. They never admitted anything. But after 1 year, I found out that my little brother stole it. For a whole year, I couldn't even watch it. And for me, that was like one of the biggest blasts I had in my life.
So you never saw it before he took it?
I watched it maybe once or twice. But because the movie being so violent, my parents would have found out that I was actually watching like some bloody anime, so they would have confiscated.
Did you have to pretend to be an adult to get it?
No, it's friends.
What impressed you most when you saw the film?
I would say maybe like the strike, like all the smoke when they because the animation on this movie is mind blowing. We're gonna go back to it later, but like maybe like the smoke or like the first biker
chase.
race. Yeah, the chase is amazing. It's like plus the music and everything. This thing is just a masterpiece.
How about you guys, Ian? First time you saw the film?
Well, I think one of my friends from school might have stolen Stephane's tape because it was handed round at secondary school by a lad that had just been on holiday to France, I believe. So, no, it was passed around like kind of illicit tape. It was like a porno being handed round.
For me, that was Clockwork Orange. We had a Swedish version.
Yeah, I do remember that my friend gave it to me at secondary school, and I remember taking it home that night and watching it and not really getting it, or being completely blown away, but not really knowing what I was watching or understanding. But then the next day at school, like absolutely pretending that, yeah, I understand what this is. I completely get it. I understand everything that's gone on. I guess we must have watched it a lot at university as well, but always through clouds of sort of herbal smoke, which I don't think really probably helped my understanding as well.
I saw it in a pub. It was played, I'm sure it was illegal, but it was played in a Melbourne pub. It screamed while I was, in and out of buying jugs.
And so did you get it as well as I did as a stoned kid?
I remember being very impressed by the aesthetics, remembering that the lighting and those smoke effects that Stephane was talking about. I mean, it was fantastic. And I remember a lot of the body horror at the end, but I don't really think I ever got the story. It would have been until the second or third time I saw the film.
Because for me, I grew up watching like Transformers and He-Man, so I didn't know a cartoon could do this. I didn't know you were allowed to do
Hanna-Barbera.
Exactly, yeah. The Flintstones. I didn't know your cartoons could do this, that could be action and sexual and have violence and motorbike gangs.
Well, that's one of the things about this film, that it was the first time, I think, for a lot of people that they saw a Japanese anime and understood it to be anime. I watched Astro Boy, Otomo. That was on when I was a little kid. But this was the first time I had seen something that was cinematic. It did leave a huge impression. How about you, Maria?
Well, I watched it in Japan, and I watched it on TV. And what was weird, because I was in my early teens, it was like, why is something in anime shown at midnight? So I continued watching, and I was literally blown away because it was everything that anime was not. It was really cinematic. So I just remember being very shocked by the body transformations. And that is something that still strikes me, even watching it like recently. Also the general sadness of the characters. That was something that struck me. But at the same time, the Japanese was complicated for me at the time. So when I rewatched it, I understood a little bit more about the story. But incredibly enough, the visual things that struck me the first time I saw it are still the ones that strike me now.
How relevant is Akira today?
I'm not sure the movie right now would have the same impact that they used to have before, just because right now the people are they watching movies as often as they're going to McDonald's, and also they eat movies on a daily basis. So they need, everything has to be, sorry to say, but kind of shows. Like if you look at like Transformers or like Fast and Furious and all those movies, it's easy to understand, and you don't really have to put your brain like you just rest your brain basically when you watch those movies.
Sorry, I didn't tell you before the show, but Maria's our resident cynic.
Okay.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Talking about the plot of the story that's not so clear. One thing that I understood, but I had no opportunity to check it, is that it depends on the fact that the movie Akira is basically half of the first volume of the manga.
Yes.
It's a mesh up with some other part. That's why it's not so easily comprehensible. But you have read the manga, right?
Yeah, I read the manga like maybe 10 times, and
Okay,
the
so-
same for the movie. So
Oh,
I was
okay.
like, half of the movie could be related to the manga, but then in the manga they go way deeper into like how people abuse drugs and how they created this kind of like new Tokyo, like some anarchists created this kind of new Tokyo, which is like completely. So I think this kind of ideas were probably a little bit too extreme for a movie that's budget.
One of the things I really like about this film is you feel like there's a world outside the film. And I think that's true of all great science fiction films, whether you're thinking of Blade Runner or Alien. You feel that there's something going on in rooms outside the frame, and the world continues outside what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And this film does that so well that the political context, it's there. Whenever a character walks down the street, there's stuff going on.
Yeah.
But it could be another story. You know, it could be a whole lot of other stories.
Yeah, I think the fact that as well, like when the story happened, if you look at like all the backgrounds, they kind of look as the same as they used to be back like during like in the early 90s, but just completely destroyed. So you actually have this, how do you say, you have your repair.
Hit me with the French.
Yeah, repère. You have your repère. Like basically, you know where you are. You can orientate yourselves. Like, those buildings looks like the same buildings as the one I'm living in and all, but just a bit more destroyed, basically. So because of this, you probably feel a bit more like how the civilization went on. It's quite funny as well to say that right now it's like we actually endure the Third World War and we actually escaped from that now. And just funny that nothing happened as the movie said.
Just on that point, the timing of the film, the nuclear holocaust takes place at the time that the film was being made.
Yeah.
And you think of Terminator, they did something similar, that in a few years, this is what's... Terminator 2 is how many years after this? It's what, 91, 92? Setting up the audience for this very bad event that's going to happen. So you've got this sense of this horror that's going to take place anytime soon, and now we're looking through the looking glass into what could be the future, if there is a future.
Now we're getting to 2020, and the Olympic Games should happen from Akira. It should happen inside, in the movie and in the manga, and actually it's going to happen next year. So
Absolutely, it's a great coincidence.
It's
isn't
amazing.
It? And the reason we're doing this show, to be frank.
It's amazing.
According to the story of the film, we should all be paying very careful attention when we're around Yoyogi. There is stuff buried.
Well, in the film, they're still
Underneath it.
building it, and now they're still building it. So it was really clairvoyancy. No, I think they were witnessing not just this movie, but witnessing living the years that some of the films were set, like Back to the Future. And to me, it's always interesting to see how the world was imagined and how the world actually is. And in
Same
Akira,
with Blade Runner, exactly.
yeah, and Akira is really clever because we see super technology, but also we see very decaying little bars like Shinjuku, and it's totally the way it is. So it's so striking.
There is a bar that features a couple of times in this film, and it looks so much like Mother.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but yes.
We have a favorite bar in Shinjuku, and the actual surface of the bar looks exactly the same. Maybe a little less messed up than the one in the...
No, going downstairs, the stairs are identical. Scary.
I mean, that's something exactly I was going to say on the world building point. The world building in this film is immense. It's spectacular. Like, I want to read the newspapers at the time. I want to go and see down the dark streets. But yeah, that was my point. Like, I really want to drink in those bars. It is Mother. I've been trying to work out what bar it reminded me of. It is those steps down.
It's the steps down,
Yes.
and it's the surface. It's the padded side of the bar.
Yes.
With the counter itself.
But one thing that we have to clarify is that they're not serving capsules, okay?
I was going to say the barmaid looks quite different in Akira too.
Just drinks.
And on the world building as well, like it is so immense and so good. And to bring it back to the point of whether it be relevant today, I would play Grand Theft Auto GTA version of Akira to walk around and be able to go and experience
Absolutely,
that world.
that's a great idea.
It'd be spectacular, wouldn't it, to be able to walk around that world and do little side missions and see other things. And I wanted to go back to the point about how we think, is it relevant today? Yes, of course, the audiences today think they want these pre-packaged ideas and something that's easy to consume and a straight-line narrative like Transformers or those kind of things. But that's not necessarily what they need. And I work a lot with young teenagers in my day job. And you'd be surprised where they find enjoyment and inspiration and things like that. I talked to a few of them about Akira, and they all have seen it and all still say it's spectacular and it's amazing. So I don't know if we need to be quite so cynical about the audience today.
Yeah, well, it's narrative versus commerce. I mean, it's what the filmmakers want to do. It's very much what we talked about on the last podcast. You have people, their job is to find the thing that will sell. A known property will sell. So if it's Transformers or whatever, boil it down to the lowest common denominator, you can sell that. It's a known brand. People are always going to relate to something that extends beyond the frame, like this kind of film, this kind of science fiction film.
And yeah, something like Akira was a game changer, like Maria was saying before, that was new in anime. And again, I think we shouldn't underestimate how much these game changers then move the parameters. Like without things like the first Marvel films, we wouldn't have all these superhero films we have now. But to get there, we had to have Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy as well.
Yeah. Well, on the subject of Christopher Nolan, a live-action remake of this film, of Akira, has been on the cards for a long time. Christopher Nolan was attached at one point. Jordan Peele was attached at another point.
I read that Leonardo DiCaprio actually owns the rights to make it.
That's going to be amazing.
And which of the three children will he play?
I hope Kyoko. He will look great with braids.
Good idea to remake this, Stefan?
No, we should keep it as it is. I mean,
But live action, come on, imagine
you
what you could
can't
do.
really. Of course, nowadays, like with the technology we have.
I'm sorry, guys, but can I
Yeah.
talk about Ghost in a Shell? I
Yeah,
think that
of
answers.
course, of course. Yeah, yes. Yeah. That's that basically. It's actually
what I mean
it's
about
a
the
great
cynicism?
example. Yeah, no. I completely, I completely follow you on this one. It's amazing because when you look at the VFX version of Ghost in the Shell, it's just like a dubbed down. I mean, I don't know how but that's kind of like go back to the fact that yes, like nowadays people, they just want to eat movies and not like think movies. So it's just easy to watch, and that's all they ask for. Boy, like
So
if you
disposable.
disposable, or just put like some brilliant VFX, some amazing action sequence with some slow motion here and there, and that's it. You get your movie.
Switch off your brain.
Yes.
So I think to add a caveat of hope to this, in the hands of the right director, someone like Gareth Edwards or Rian Johnson, you could get something interesting out of this, but I'm sure you guys can think of better directors than me that could do a decent remake.
If they have to make a remake, I would actually go for the manga, just because the manga is much deeper, and there's so much material in it. And actually, just like as a little aparté, the manga has been finished after the movie was done. They made the movie, and actually, Akira is actually living in the manga. He's actually there. He's actually like flesh and bones, and just like being like, you just walk around.
That's
like
right. In the film, he's
Yep.
a cameo at the end. I don't
Exactly.
want to give away exactly what's happened to Akira. But
Yeah. But like that's the main difference. Is like in one side you get Akira taken as a god, and that's actually in the manga, and on the other side you get Akira taken as a legend, or like something that actually existed back then, and that will be the anime.
I was thinking for someone who conveys humanity and sci-fi, Villeneuve, he would make a great version of it.
Yeah,
Because-
he seems to be pretty tied up with Dune over the next few years, but yes, I would love to see him
Yeah.
do it as well.
the level of CGI and the things are so high, so anything is possible. But to be really a game changer, to put something really interesting in it, you have to go beyond that, I think, beyond the violence, beyond the effects.
Yeah, you need a great storyteller.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Villeneuve is one of those.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
True.
The film's packed with amazing lighting. There's the neon signs, the video screens, explosions, architectural lighting, lighting on motorbikes, helicopter searchlights, lasers from space. Stefan, any idea how they achieved this?
Well, that's the back then. We're talking about like a movie made in like 1988. So everything was done by hand. And on top of that, it's actually the second movie that was done in 24 frames per second. Usually, like Disney standard will be like 12 frames per second, meaning that half
It's a
of
half,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. Before Akira, there was a movie called Venus Wars. It was actually the very first Japanese movie at 24 frames per second animation, meaning that somebody has to draw 24 frames, 24 images
So it's-
for just 1 second.
It's more frames, more money,
Oh,
more
yeah.
people.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
the resources are much bigger.
Meaning like if you do like 12 frames per second, it's half the budget. But on this movie, they just they just blew everything, and like all the VFX and everything. Like when you see like those light trail and all on the bikes, it's all made by hand. And even like the animators were actually animated 24 frames a second, each of those lines, and that was just only Japanese people can do this, I guess.
I'm just imagining you in a Disney meeting and saying, hey guys, we're doing only half of what we can do.
Yeah, no. Disney was actually a different kind of story. It's like they go for like the family standard, the family friendly kind of movies, and like all about the acting and also, of course, everybody heard about this Akira, but like the audience was different, so they were not really concerned about the same kind of. They were not dealing with the same kind of audience, so that was fine. But then still, when you see what Japan can do, that's amazing.
Maria, where does Akira fit into the tradition of movies that deal with the trauma of Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
Well, actually, being 1988, it was pretty much the time when a lot of works historically related to Hiroshima or Nagasaki came out. I'm thinking of, in Japanese, it's Hotaru no Haka, so it's the Grave of Fireflies. That's exactly 1988, Isao Isahata. And Hadashi no Gen, who is, in English, I think it's Barefoot Gen. This was a little bit earlier, 1983, Kenji Nakazawa. And the Grave of the Fireflies is the story of two brothers and sisters that are orphaned in Hiroshima, I think. And they are treated badly by the family they were supposed to be received in, and they escape. And the story follows them. Moments of little joys like playing with little fireworks until the little sister's death. So I think it's one of the most like heartbreaking and at the same time really realistic movie about Hiroshima. And also Hadashi no Gen is the story of an orphan after the bombing. And this film is 1988, but we also have to think about a dystopian way of thinking about the nuclear bombing is Hayao Miyazaki's Nausicaa. Nausicaa is also imagining a nuclear world in the future. I think that probably like time-wise, it was almost like Japan was kind of creatively metabolizing everything that they went through. Because I think for a long time, like politically, so during 50s, 60s, I think they were not allowed to expressly talk about things. So they also developed a way through manga or through films like Godzilla. Like, for example, Astro Boy is a nuclear experiment of a scientist who lost his son and wants to replace him with a robot. So there were ways of showing this, but I think really in the 80s, gaining with the bubble, gaining financial...
Confidence, really.
Yeah, confidence. I think it was a time to rethink history in creatively original way. So I think it fits in that time.
Ian, could the film have been set anywhere but Tokyo?
For me, no, I can't imagine it being anywhere else than Tokyo. In Tokyo, like the city is so much of a character in the film as well. Those back streets, the way it looks. Before I moved to Japan, I hadn't really been here. I'd actually been here to work for an NGO where part of our job was to educate people about the effects of nuclear weapons. And one of the films we show is Graveyard of Fireflies to show the impact on people. But no, I can't imagine any other city than Tokyo. Before I moved here, Akira's vision of Tokyo was what I thought it would look like. And when I moved here, I moved into Kabukicho and lived on the outskirts.
As one does.
As one does. I moved into the outskirts of the red light district. May have got a part-time job as a host, but we don't talk about that. And it did look like Neo Tokyo. It looked like what I expected. I didn't realize now, being a slightly more well-formed adult. There's other bits of Tokyo, but yeah, it really did. I can't imagine being anywhere else.
Neo Tokyo is Kabukicho, right? I can recognize some
Well,
of
it's
that.
Shinjuku. I think
Shinjuku,
that
yeah.
Shinjuku definitely plays a big part in there because you have those overhead shots, like almost like drone shots today, looking down from the skyscrapers. You've got the panoramics of the buildings moving, the lights in the windows. So you have the overhead level and the protests going on these kind of bridges and causeways. Then you have down on the streets or under the streets where you have sewer systems, you have people in bars. So yeah, you have this complete sort of cross-section of society in the film.
Yes.
And all of it seems to exist here in Shinjuku, or as Ian was
Well,
saying,
I'm having an
Kabukicho.
epiphany. Neo Tokyo, Shinjuku, Shin is new. So maybe that was the key.
One of the first times I walked out of Shinjuku train station, I walked out of the west exit into a political protest against something, and then you had the multi-levels, and it was that moment of, oh my god, I am in Akira. Like, what's going to happen next?
Without the mindless violence.
That came later when I discovered Kabukicho and Drinking with Irish Boys.
Yeah, I think I have to agree. Tokyo it's unique and okay because if you think of Ghost in the Shell, so Ghost in the Shell was supposedly made in Tokyo, back on the anime that was based in Tokyo. On the movie, they actually filmed everything in Hong Kong because actually Hong Kong got this kind of like neon light outside, have this kind of like the same feeling that you have here in Tokyo, but in probably a bigger scale as well. So
We replaced them all with LEDs.
Yes,
Yeah, all those
exactly,
neon signs are gone, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm someone who loves that look, but Hong Kong, I think, is a better place if you're doing like a live action.
Yeah. No, just Tokyo, only Tokyo. But the funny thing that the first time I came to London, I was walking down like on the south bank of the Thames, and arriving to La City, like where all the banks are, like looking at this city, all the buildings look so like eclectic and like exotic. It was like all those lights everywhere. I was like, oh, that looks like Neo Tokyo. And seriously, if anybody have been to London and just walk on the South Bank by night and just look at bank, so like all this area of like the La City, it exactly looks like Neo Tokyo.
I saw the film in Bakuon in Kichijoji, I know, maybe 6-7 years ago. I still remember coming out of the cinema and the music was playing in my head. Bakuon, for anyone who's not familiar with it, it's a very loud kind of rock concert experience of a movie. Ian, did you have a similar reaction when you saw the film? Did the music make a big impression?
I think maybe as a teenager the music kind of slipped me by because I was not quite listening to that kind of stuff, but now having rewatched it, I think the soundtrack, it still sounds modern. It sounds like something that could easily be soundtracking something now. I saw elements of it in Drive and things like that, kind of back to electronica. But we were talking before the podcast started and you were saying they did the sound in a particular way, Marcus.
If you watch the behind the scenes on the 2013 Blu-ray, there's a number of pieces about the making of the soundtrack, and they talk about it being a kind of modular system. The composer says, therefore, he could break things into pieces and vary the length of the units used to hit the timing for the film. In this film, it's largely like gamelan and vocal. It's not so much kind of traditional instruments or, electric guitars. It's keyboards, gamelan, and singing, shouting. It has a very organic feel, which is really appropriate for the images that you see at the end of the film.
Yeah, much like the animation, like the soundtrack was nothing I'd really heard before, or I wasn't used to this. I was used to soundtracks telling me the score would swell or there'd be a sound effect telling me how to feel. But in this, it takes a back seat to the animation, but it also accentuates the animation. Like now knowing that about the modular stuff, you can see that the music was written to help the impact of the film.
I know that the soundtrack was written before the film was made. So they had that, and they, of course, made some edits, but it was there before they put the film together, or at least edited it together.
Which is pretty unusual because usually Japanese films are locked. They finish it and they give it to the composer.
I think it's unusual everywhere. I know that Rian Johnson's Star Wars film, they did that John Williams wrote the music before they edited the film.
You have the kind of like sometime in the manga, in the anime, like Japanese anime, you have the same, even with the voices. It's like animators will do the animation first with like the lines that they have to animate, and then the voices will be done afterwards. So it's a little bit, how to say, it's quite special, basically, the way Japanese people work sometimes.
Another thing about the music is it's very holy. If you think about it, it's all about vocal swells, it's choral, it feels like something that was written for some sort of rite or celebration. It doesn't sound like it's a traditional soundtrack by any means. So the film also features a couple of classic sci-fi tropes. There's the military man, there's the obsessive scientist who reminded me of Pierce Brosnan in Mars Attacks. What did you think of the treatment of these characters in the film?
Well, what really struck me was that the military guy, Colonel Shikishima, it is almost like what in another country, in another film, a president would be.
Well, in this film, he leads a coup. He actually takes over the reins of power.
Yeah. What we gather from what he says is that his own idea was to protect the country and to restore it.
So is it glorifying the military, Maria?
It heavily looks like that. And the colonel's complaint about Neo-Tokyo is that it's a fallen city where everyone is just following their own instincts, their own lust, and he wants to restore it.
That idea comes up time and time again in the
Yes.
film. Another conversation, there's Ryu, the kind of the freedom fighter, but he's allied with one of the corrupt politicians. And they talk about change coming. They talk about one day everything is going to change, everything's going to be washed away. And it's a bit like, people joking about earthquakes, that one day everything's going to change.
Yeah, it's the aspiration to, in any possible way, just have everything wiped away.
Yeah, this tabula rasa thing.
Yeah.
It seems very prominent in the film. So tabula rasa and a metamorphosis. Like there's an individual metamorphosis, there's the societal metamorphosis, which we're talking about here.
The Akira project, it almost justified because it just went wrong because it went into the hands of a not so capable scientist. So ultimately, the scientist is the person that's blamed and received one of the worst treatments, I think.
Well, in terms of what happens to the scientist.
Yes.
There's a paternalism at work in this film. I see it most obviously in the role of the military character. Father knows best. I know what's good for you.
I don't know if I'm the only one noticing it, but the first time I saw the film, I was very confused between the Colonel and Ryu. They kind of look very much the same. Almost like it's a father of a different fraction, two different sides of the father figure.
I think you've just set up the sequel.
Thinking about hidden messages, what struck me watching it lately was the three Espa, the three kids, saying at the end, if we all go together, because they're thinking of running away from Tetsuo while he's having this major transformation and is really beginning to be a death machine. They want to escape. And I think Kyoko, the girl, is like, but if we all go together, if we all ally together, we may make it. So it's a very Japanese kind of ganbarimashou, let's put all our forces together kind of message.
Yeah, but you said never cross the streams. It's Ghostbusters. Everybody has to cross the streams. They have to cross that Rubicon. Going through the reviews of the film in the late 80s, I was struck by how many people commented about the violence. And it could just be me, having since seen a lot of Tarantino films, but do you think that we've become immune to the kind of graphic images depicted in the film, Ian?
I mean, I think when I first saw it as a teenager, that was certainly the most shocking element, was not just the violence, but the things it would show in, as I said earlier, like in a cartoon, and the fact it would show a sexual assault, the fact it was showing like quite graphic fight scenes. But yeah, I do think now we are slightly becoming immune to a certain type of violence, the over-stylized stuff we see in TV shows and films now. But I think still the violence in Akira is quite shocking just because it's done so artfully and so beautifully that I think it is like a painted canvas. So it's still, when I rewatched it the other day, it's not that it comes as a surprise, but it still does have an impact.
So less Tarantino, more Caravaggio. And finally, Ian, you have correspondence from the Facebook.
Yes, Marcus. So today, again, as you've told me to do, I put out a question asking people on Facebook what was their favorite animation or the most influential animation from them. So we've had a number of correspondence. First up is the lovely Sam Berry from Jimmy Binks and the Shakehorns, who says, How have I missed this podcast? We'll definitely have a listen later. So didn't tell us his favorite animation or what was most influential. So thanks for playing, Sam, but better luck next time. Next up, we have the lovely JC Carty, who is now our regular correspondent. His favorite is the very recent How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, which has just been released. I don't think we've got the final one in Japan yet. He says, with How to Train Your Dragon, he said it's being amazing how much you get to see Hiccup grow in the 3 films and how he was made stronger with Astrid beside him. He was also like a shout out to the most recent Spider-Man film, Into the Spider-Verse, because he loves the leap of faith it takes. And our final correspondence was from a very old friend, Oliver Jones. So nice to hear from you, Ollie. It was originally my brother's punk band Chump State when he was 15.
Sorry, what was the name?
Chump State. Yes, they were an interesting band. I think my brother spent most of the time swinging his guitar around his head, smashing things and playing any music. But yes, so I did
a rite
love
of passage.
It's a rite of passage. I did love Chump State. But Oliver is now himself an animator. So he said some of his favorites are things like the classic, the Iron Giant, Princess Mononoke, Hercules, A Night Before Christmas, and one that I really should have mentioned earlier and brought up was Kubo and the Two Strings. And again, he would give a big shout out to Spider-Verse. He has asked if I could sing a Chump State song, but I didn't and still don't know any of the lyrics.
Well, you know what to do. Send in the lyrics. We'll get Ian singing on the next episode. You've been listening to The Last Picture House. Questions or comments? You can find us on Twitter where we're at Last Pic House or on Instagram where we're Last Picture House. Stephane, thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me here.
We're traveling over the next few weeks, but we'll be back with another episode. Thanks for listening.